What?
I'm okay, my head is splitting.
Where's Tom Cruise? Get away from this house, you
Freya, what are you
devil!
doing? Give me the gun!
No! You have been beaten! You will turn, eat us, I know. I've seen it now. Get away!
Freya! They were at the crash. I invited them. Just give me the...
No! I will not have this devil in my house!
Your house. You may have snuck your whole family in the moment I was gone, but this is still my home!
You abandoned me!
Well, I'm back now, and you are still my housekeeper, so give me the bloody... gun!
Stop shouting. I need a timeout.
Emma, we've got a problem. Our friend here has been bitten.
So? What the bloody hell does that mean?
It means they will turn into a beast! We must kill them!
It wasn't too long ago that most had given up hope that Dead Island 2 would ever come out. Originally announced all the way back in 2014, the action RPG sequel went through its fair share of development issues, including numerous delays and changing developers multiple times. Thanks to developer Dambuster Studios, however, Dead Island 2 is finally here, and after all is said and done, it's worth the wait. It's not a spectacular experience that'll take your breath away by any means, but if you're looking for a well-made, fun, and gory zombie-slaying adventure, you absolutely cannot go wrong with Dead Island 2. Set about a decade after the events of the original Dead Island, the sequel takes players to Los Angeles. A zombie outbreak has swept over the city, and it's now lying in ruins, crawling with the undead, while survivors barely manage to hold out in scattered pockets. The new setting also brings with it a completely new cast of 6 playable characters, and though there are some connections in its story to the events of Dead Island and Dead Island Riptide, including some returning characters here and there, by and large, the sequel stands on its own as a self-sufficient story, which newcomers should be glad to hear. The story itself isn't anything special though, and the fairly straightforward zombie narrative isn't helped by the writing and dialogue, which for most of the characters can often border on being annoying. Most key characters, including some of the playable ones, very rarely have anything of value to say. More often than not, you'll likely find yourself just itching to get back into the action again. That said, what does help the game ensure that players remain engaged is how well it utilizes its setting. Its version of LA is ravaged by an undead outbreak and buckling under subsequent chaos, but it's still LA. It's full of personality and variety, and sports a vibrant and sharp aesthetic, one that excellently brings the many areas of the city that you visit to life. From the relatively more quiet neighborhoods of Beverly Hills to much more crowded Santa Monica Pier to a number of indoor locations, there's an impressive amount of variety on display in terms of both visual style and design. That design is another one of Dead Island 2's bigger strengths. In fact, rather than taking an open world approach, the game instead literally guides you through a number of different locations in LA, some of which are larger and more open-ended, while others are much more guided. In doing so, the game maintains focus and momentum while still allowing for plenty of opportunities to go off the beaten path and take on optional activities or side quests, or simply just explore. It's a very well-struck balance. There's enough content to keep you occupied for plenty of time, and yet it rarely overstays its welcome. While, if you wish, you can also return to previously visited areas. Undoubtedly, Dead Island 2's decision to favor density over size does its pacing great favors. But of course, the star of the show here is the brutal, crunching combat. It's not very often that games manage to get first-person melee combat right, and issues like jank and imprecise gameplays tend to be far more prevalent. That thankfully isn't the case in Dead Island 2. Movements are precise and responsive. Every hit lands with satisfying feedback, and enemies respond in ways that pull you in even more, so that even if you're just playing the game as a straight-up hack-and-slash experience, you're still bound to have fun. There's an impressive variety of weapons to use, from lead pipes, rakes, and machetes to sledgehammers, claws, and even much more. And yes, you do also get some ranged weapons as you get deeper into the game, though the primary focus still is very much remaining on melee combat. Each weapon is fun to use in its own way, and thanks to the durability mechanic, you will frequently find yourself picking up and swapping between a large and varied arsenal. That's something I rarely had a problem with though, not only because the game allows you to repair your broken weapons at workbenches, but also because it always remains satisfying to watch the undead enemies responding to different weapons in different ways, from getting maimed and sliced if you're using a katana, to getting crushed or swept away if you swing at them with a sledgehammer, to getting immobilized and fried to death if they get electrocuted by an electrified machete. The so-called flesh system has a huge role to play in that, of course. Dead Island 2 is an incredibly gory game, and it takes great pride in that fact. It takes every chance it gets to show your enemies getting dismembered, burnt, electrocuted, crushed, maimed, and what have you in such gleefully gory detail as possible, and adds to the fundamentally fun nature of the combat quite a bit. Meanwhile, the game also throws an increasing number of different kinds of enemies as you progress further, each coming with their own strengths that force you to adopt new strategies. Combine that with moves like blocking, dodging, jumping, kicking, and jump kicking, also contributing to the mobile nature of the combat, and you get a game that implements the fundamentals of its immediate gameplay loop very well. Combat is also lent more depth by the game's focus on the interactivity of environments, and how well that works in conjunction with the elemental damage and attacks. Whether you're luring zombies into puddles of water that have live electrical wires lying in them, or pouring fuel on them from a can that can set them on fire. Studying your environments and finding creative ways to take out enemies always remains enjoyable. Meanwhile, weapons can also be upgraded and customized with mods to fuse them with elemental damage, the results of which, in combat, are also satisfying to say the least. Heavier customization and progression mechanics are involved in Dead Island 2's skill deck system, which is essentially the RPG half of the action RPG. You find and unlock new skill cards throughout the game, each bringing unique buffs and perks ranging from passive bonuses to your stats to much more immediate boosts that can make certain moves more effective. From the different stats that the 6 playable characters start with to how you can then go on to further customize their strengths and weaknesses through the skill deck system, the game offers a decent amount of options available for tailoring your build to your playstyle. It's not the most exhaustive progression system that you'll ever see, but it does just enough to ensure that the game's combat loop never runs out of steam, while also helping make exploration and optional content more engaging. Whether or not Dead Island 2 is a game that justifies the long wait leading up to its release, that's a difficult question to answer, not least because of just how long that wait has been. But maybe it's ridiculous to even expect the game to live up to nearly a decade's worth of anticipation. Here's what I can say though. It's an easy game to recommend. It may not necessarily offer anything we haven't seen several times before in similar releases, but what it does offer is well made and a hell of a lot of fun. From the buckets of gore to the hack and slash combat to how well it brings a zombie-riddled LA to life in its own fun way, there's a lot to like about Dead Island 2. Hey, did you know that we at Gaming Bolt upload new videos every day? Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.